For the final word in sports all across the state, you're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
A bunch of folks tonight asked questions about our team and probably paid a little more attention to us as we played into the NCAA tournament. I thought, advancing to the Sweet 16 was a significant accomplishment, something that hadn't been done in over 20 years. Very difficult to do in our sport. And, the way we did it by playing so well in the first two games against New Mexico State and Auburn, I think our fans were very proud of that.
I've said this 5 years now. There's this misconception that we call guys in and say, you got to go. Right. Coaches get blamed for every transfer.
We're the only level of football that doesn't have anything like that. We don't have even if you didn't have the fans there, you just had a practice like basketball does. Like our basketball team plays somebody every year and nobody sees it, but that's fine. You want to have a chance to gauge where your team is.
Good evening, everybody. To Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on a Tuesday night. That's more like it. Outside, 75 degrees and climbing here in the capital city. Beautiful afternoon around the state of South Carolina, and we are here to cap it off with a dynamic edition of Sports Talk. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, Will Muschamp will join us live as we look back at the spring practice and look ahead to the upcoming season with the Gamecock football team. Also, you'll hear more. You didn't get enough Dabo Swinney last night? We got more for you. He was in town today. It's the Prowl and Growl meeting of the Clemson IPTAY organization in Columbia. He and Brad Brownell in town, and Will went out to listen in to the both of them as they talk to the media. So we'll have that for you as well tonight.
As someone who was out there, and you think that there isn't a Clemson presence in this town or in the Midlands, it's there, and they're all in one place. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying.
All in one place, as in like the Jameel Temple?
Yes, I'm saying they're all in one place right now. If I'm just saying they're all in one place right now.
So if you wanted to knock out every Clemson fan in the Midlands, just go to the Jameel Temple is what you're suggesting.
I'm not suggesting to do that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying they're all there.
Big crowd?
It's huge.
Yeah.
I couldn't get out.
Yeah. Well, maybe they were trying to grab at you and get your autograph.
No, they were. There was a line for Dabo Swinney like Macy's Friday after Thanksgiving for Santa Claus in Herald Square. That's how big it was.
Well, a lot of times I know that fans are more vociferous when they live in the other team's backyards. For instance, if you go to Greenville and there's a Gamecock thing, there's a bunch of them just stack into Greenville because they know they're enemy territory.
Well, the Charlotte event for Will Muschamp was also very, very packed after their spring game after in March, and they had the baseball game that coincided with that.
All right, so we're going to hear from the two head coaches in football, USC and Clemson, and the two head coaches in basketball, USC and Clemson. Frank Martin was speaking last night up in where was he? Rock Hill? Was it Charlotte? Where was he?
I wasn't sure.
Fort Mill. Anyway,
Somewhere.
It was a USC Gamecock Club stop, and he was speaking.
In Lancaster.
Was it Lancaster?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, he's right.
All right, we got some audio from that we'll share with you. Chris Silva announced today that he is going to put his name into the NBA draft. He's not going to retain an agent. Of course, P.J. Dozier said the same thing last year at the outset. Did he not? Didn't he go into this thing without an agent, and
Correct.
then he did the agent thing after a couple of weeks?
He also went into it knowing that he'd already had a almost devastating knee injury too.
So Silva has thrown his name in, not hiring an agent. He has until 10 days after the combine, which is May 16th through the 20th in Chicago, to make his decision to stay in the draft or return for his senior season. Of course, he has been a player who has gotten better every year and has contributed statistically more and more every year. And, of course, he has grown into the leader of the USC basketball team. This past season, 14 points and 8 rebounds per game. First team All-SEC by the league coaches. Also named to the All-Defensive team, the co-defensive player of the year. Do you think his game is ready
No.
to go to the NBA?
I don't think it is.
I will say this. I don't know anybody outside of Bird and Magic where their game was ready when they walked into the NBA. Not even Jordan, because of the physicality of he had to learn to play with. But
How about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
He's well, I mean, the most devastating weapon known to man. Everybody thinks it's a hydrogen bomb. No, it's a skyhook. But
he didn't have the skyhook when he went to the NBA.
Yeah, he did have it.
He developed that later
well,
on.
No,
didn't
he perfected it
after the dunk rule happened.
He perfected it. It was there. But no, Silver reminds me of a guy that in his prime, when he gets, and if he makes the next level, he's going to be that nuisance guy in the playoffs who's just going to try to shut down one of your forwards and just block everything that comes into the underneath the basket. That's the kind of guy.
Here are Chris Silva's barriers to the next level. He needs to develop more of a perimeter game, and by perimeter game I mean outside of 15 feet. He needs to learn how to defend without fouling, and he also needs to learn how to stay on the floor, which also goes into that fouling situation. So I think those are the things that the NBA scouts are going to tell him. They're going to tell him that he has a good foundation, I think. And I hope, I'm not saying this from the standpoint of wishing, but I hope he makes the best informed decision, because I know that while PJ Dozier, and I hate to compare the situations, I know PJ Dozier got in some games with the Oklahoma City Thunder and is making a nice living with the Oklahoma City Blue in the G League. I hate to make this situation turn into something where these guys make the decision just because of the money grab. I want them to necessarily get themselves in the best possible spot for their professional career.
I don't think it was a money grab for PJ. I think PJ worried about that knee that could have ended his career in high school. And so he's saying, look, let me go now, because he didn't know whether that knee would go out the next year or not. So there are mitigating circumstances for him. But I will say this for Silva. I don't think he has to worry about fouling. Did he have any foul problems when they went to the Final Four? No, because they referee the game with a little bit more physicality in the postseason.
And they let more
go. So he had no problem. So in the NBA, I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Well, let's see if he decides to go that way. That would be a devastating loss for a USC basketball team, which is basically rebuilding its roster again. And, you know, if he returns for his senior year, then you have got a quality player and a leader to build around. You take him off the team, and they are, they're in a big hurt if that happens. We'll have Kerry Tharp with us in our normal 7:30 slot for him to talk about Bristol, the 24 hours of Bristol, which concluded yesterday.
Which is not to be confused with the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Correct. And Bristol is one big left-hand turn. Le Mans has got a bunch of turns. And we got baseball tonight, of course. USC and Clemson in action. The Gamecocks back at home against Presbyterian. My goodness, it's been a long time since the Gamecocks were at Founders Park. Their last home game was going back to the, Tennessee game on March 31st. This will be their first home game in the month of April.
And it wasn't by design, because they had to switch the two Citadel dates. The Citadel date was supposed to be here when they actually moved it back and switched it because of the rain down in the low country earlier this year.
I wonder if that wind we have here in the city will maintain, and will it be blowing out or blowing in?
Yeah, good question. It's windy out there, and that's a 7 o'clock first pitch over at the Founders Park, and the pitching matchup is scheduled to be Carmen Modinsky, the freshman right-hander for USC, 1-3. 2.45 ERA. Andrew Durden, freshman right-hander, starting for Presbyterian, 0-1 with a 10.19 ERA. The Gamecocks are 20-16, and Presbyterian is 12-26.
Mark really liked what he got out of Majinski last week with the 5 innings and 5 strikeouts, and he got a lot of run support, and you would expect the same to kind of come tonight, because this will be really the first time with them at home with all the guys back. And I think that is a stabilizing force for this team that they need, especially going into a tough opponent this weekend with LSU.
And Clemson plays in Athens tonight at 7 o'clock. It's a rematch of the game from last Tuesday night in North Augusta that Georgia won. Clemson hitting a little bit of a bump in the road once again. The Tigers have lost 3 of their last 4, including that loss to Georgia. They had the devastating loss to Miami where they blew the big lead. Only won 1 game in that series at home against Miami. And tonight, the pitching matchup for this one will be Travis Marr for the Tigers and Will Proctor for for Georgia. 800-956-7266 is our number. If you want to join us, we'll be right back.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Welcome back into Sports Talk, everybody. South Carolina Radio Network. From downtown Columbia, 800-956-7266. Bottom of the hour, Will Muschamp will be with us as he's been, of course, making the rounds with Gamecock Club meetings underway for him. And I think doing some recruiting now. Now the recruiting period has gone live once again. We'll have our recruiting update for you coming up in just a little bit.
He's putting out offers like I go through the grocery store with all the offers that I put out there. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, They have put out a couple of offers to receivers today. They've kind of reeled it back a little bit in terms of the volume of offers, but that's what you have to do when you're trying to build your program and build your depth. You're not going to get a guy if you don't offer. You got to step up with the offer and show the interest. If you don't offer, you're not going to have any chance with the guy.
It's like that's the same philosophy in playing the lottery, Corn.
Exactly. And sometimes what happens?
Sometimes you win.
Oh no,
Absolutely.
well, yeah. The sales approach, you have to use the what they call the shotgun approach. You send as many BBs out as you can. You use that rifle approach. You may not get an answer yes for 20 years.
I mean, I'm sure his goal ultimately in recruiting is to get to the point where they don't have to mass offer, where they can be more specific and cut that list down some, because they'll be in a position to attract players to them who will come on their own because they want to play at South Carolina based on their success on the field.
Well, that's what you're seeing in the upstate with Clemson. Their offer list is a lot shorter, and a lot of it is because of the fact that they got players who come to them, and like I hate to use the analogy I made before, but they're shopping in a more exclusive club, so to speak.
All right, let's go to the phones here on Sports Talk. Clay in Myrtle Beach. Good evening, sir.
Hey.
Welcome in. How are you?
Good evening. Good evening. How are you guys? I got two topics. Real quick, I just wanted to touch on you brought up Chris Silva. I just happened to think about. I mean, I'm a Gamecock fan, so of course I wish you'd stay in school. But I can't recall. Maybe I have seen it, but just can't think of it right now. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody improve year to year at a rate as much as he has. And I'm just thinking, if he stayed one more year, I mean, he could. If he stays on that same trajectory, he could possibly work himself into a first rounder.
Well, I think that's a tribute to his work ethic and of course the hard coaching that Frank Martin has said he has put on Silva since he got to South Carolina. But the kid does have a great work ethic, and I think the sky is the limit for him. I think he can become so much better. Just think about how far he came from his sophomore year to his junior year, how a much more complete game he had last season. Give him another year in college and working with Martin and the staff and working on his own. He should be a terrific player as a senior if he comes back.
Absolutely. And real quick, Phil, with what you're seeing right now and at this time with Muschamp and recruiting, where do you see kind of this class filling out at? The only thing I worry about with all the early offers is, a lot of the top tier guys don't decide until the very end. So I always worry about having enough spots to get some of those higher end guys that you're waiting on and are filling up too quickly. But I was just curious what direction you kind of see this class going in as far as where it end up ranked or whatever.
Well, thanks. I don't get into the ranking of classes. That's just not my thing. But I think that they're off to a good start in getting offensive linemen. They've got the quarterback that they want, and that's always a bonus. You get the big-time quarterback. That usually attracts big-time receivers and other offensive weapons to your class. So that should help having a Ryan Helinski in the boat.
The thing about him, too, is that that's a family move for them. That's not something that's going to change. You have him, and you have him about as solid as you have.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, again, he is still building the program. He has to get to what you're talking about. You have to show that you can win. The elite players are shopping for programs that can get to the playoffs, where they know they're going to have a shot at getting a ring or two while they're in college. South Carolina, first thing it's got to do is win the East and get to the SEC championship. That would be a big breakthrough. And then you take the next step and win the championship and get to the playoffs. So you do that, then some of those bigger boys will have you on the list. You'll have to ride the wave with them until a lot of those guys do like to wait until the end. However, I think many are starting to make the decision to sign early and get it done before their senior season.
Just as many people would say that Will Muschamp is in the place he ought to be, because being at Florida where you're supposed to win is not his deal. His deal is, let me get somewhere where they're scrapping. This is where I am. I don't think he will ever get rid of his recruiting where he sees a diamond in the rough and tells everybody, watch me. They think this kid That's a kid right there. Why do you think a lot of guys after South Carolina offer them, suddenly the offers start to build? Because some of the other coaches know Will Muschamp sees things that they don't see.
And the other thing, too, and this kind of goes back to the point on Helinski, is that these guys, yeah, they want to win championships, but ultimately they want to get to the league. They want to get themselves in the National Football League. And the way that they do that is you play big teams and you have successful guys around you. They want to play around successful guys. They want to play around a successful quarterback. If you're a defensive player, you want to play around a successful defensive scheme that can win football games and can give you the most exposure. When they prove they can do that on a consistent level, then you can maybe pare down your offer list. The upward movement is undeniable right now for them.
Well, I can say this. I mean, if you're a South Carolina fan, you can rest easy in that you've got the best recruiting head coach
you've had.
Yeah, Brad Scott was a very good recruiting head coach. His recruiting got lost in the fact that he lost his program. Will Muschamp is winning now, and he's recruiting as hard as anybody in the country, and he's recruiting well. And, you know, he is going to get a lot of good players. Some of the players he gets are not going to be the guys with all the stars by their names and that sort of thing. You have to ignore that. You have to believe that he and his staff have done their due diligence and know what they're getting. And what's always impressed me about Muschamp since he came to South Carolina is his knowledge of every player that he recruits and every player on his team, knowing about the player, about his family, and about his coach. And he's trying to build that culture, that family feeling culture at South Carolina, which, let's face it, it hasn't been there. When you're dealing with head coaches like Lou Holtz and Steve Spurrier, who gave you about 15 years of Hall of Fame coaching, but they were at the end of their career, and they weren't there to build a program. They were there to try to win some games and further establish their legacies. And, you know, Lou didn't even have a full-time residence in Columbia. He didn't even own a house here.
And their name alone could get guys, but they didn't grind the way that Will Muschamp
Actually,
does.
you go back and look at the Spurrier years, the thought when Spurrier was hired was that, man, quarterbacks are just going to line up and want to come to South Carolina.
They didn't.
Didn't happen.
I never thought that.
You never thought that would happen?
No, you know why?
Why?
Because glamour quarterbacks never went to Florida because they didn't like Spurrier's taskmaster approach. You notice his best quarterbacks, his first quarterback that was great, was Shane? I can't remember his name.
Down in Florida?
Yeah, he was a walk-on. Yeah, Warfel,
Shane Matthews.
Yeah. Warfel was not great shakes with an arm, but he was the guy that took the Spurrier's coaching. Other guys just, I can't deal with that. I can't deal with
you talk about, you know, the reliance on rankings and not necessarily paying attention to the rankings. I just looked up, you know, what rivals had on Deebo Samuel coming out of school. He was a 3-star kid. He was 10th best player in the state, 53rd best at his position in the country. You could probably say he's the most dynamic player in this conference and the most dynamic player South Carolina's had in a while. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm saying that from South Carolina's perspective, it's not just about finding guys. It's about finding guys you can develop and harness the particular characteristics that make them successful, like Deebo and his speed and his ability to be a dynamic playmaker.
I will say this. I think a school's recruiting arrives when people look at what may be an unglamorous position, but you got to have it. I know Clemson had Deshaun Watson, but when they got those two studs at tackle, defensive tackle to me is the hardest position to find at the college level. When you start getting those guys, you know your recruiting is top notch.
Okay, we'll be back. We're going to talk more with the Gamecock head football coach Will Muschamp joining us here on Sports Talk after the break. Coach Muschamp, I'm here.
Anthony Davis.
I don't want to be. All right, welcome back into Sports Talk, everybody. South Carolina Radio Network across the states. Good to have you with us wherever you're dialed in. Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, the Professor Tom Hayes. We're joined now by USC head football coach Will Muschamp. Coach, good evening. How are you?
Phil, how you doing, bud?
We are great. Thank you so much for joining us as we wanted to catch up with you and get your thoughts about spring, which you wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. So I know you've gone back and evaluated everything from the spring, and I wonder if in your evaluation, does it give you sleepless nights about your team, or has it led you to clear some space in your trophy case for what this team might accomplish?
Well, we're a long way away from that right now. I'm going through still the exit interviews with all of our players, and I meet with everybody, and really it's so critical. And we started this a week ago of April, May, June, and July. So starting tomorrow, 106 days till we report. And understanding it's not about what we think can be the end result of the season. It's not about the season. It's about focusing on August 2nd when we report and be the best version of you can be in the best shape you can be in, as fast as you've ever been, as strong as you've ever been. And we really, over the next 106 days, we've got to really prepare and strain mentally and physically to put ourselves in that position, because we can't have a good year unless we have a great training camp. And that's been my experience as a coach. We've got to have a great training camp. You look at last year, I thought we had a really good training camp. We played 2 bowl teams to start the season on the road, one at a neutral site, one on the road, and won both games. And so at the end of the day, that's what we need to focus on right now. It's not about the end result. It's about the preparation and strain we need to put in over these 107 days.
All right, let me ask you, too, to update everybody on your injuries coming out of spring, the guys who couldn't go in the spring. Can you update us on them and how they look for that August 2nd reporting date?
I think everybody will be full speed except Chad Terrell. Chad is a guy I think, based on the surgery, they thought it went extremely well. Should be cleared around the 1st of September, and we'll know more about probably the middle of September whether or not he can contribute. Right now, we feel like that he's a guy that's going to be able to contribute to our team this fall.
What do you feel you're most proud of that you accomplished this spring with your team?
I don't know, proud would be the word, but I think that we made progress. I think it's a little bit misleading offensively, especially without Debo Samuel, who was limited by knee throughout spring. Brian Edwards missed some time with the shoulder. Rico Dowdle was limited. So we have some guys that are some obvious weapons for us. So I don't know if we got a true picture of where we're going to be offensively in the fall, but from spring. But I do think we made tremendous progress in some areas. I'm really pleased with our offensive line, especially our starting five. I think Blake Camper's a guy that's made a huge difference in himself because of the weight room. Really proud of him. Darius Hutchinson had a really good spring. We're looking forward to getting Malik back on the offensive side of the ball. He missed all of spring with an injury. So again, Zach Bailey's back at his most natural position. Donnell's been a seamless transition at the center position. Dennis Daly continues to improve. So again, our skill wasn't there, but I'm pleased with how we gelled up front and how Jake Bentley played. I think defensively, again, we've got to have Jemias Williams got to get back healthy. We need to find some answers at the safety position. Phil, I'm concerned about that. I do feel like we've got two really good cover corners, and I would like to be able to move Keyshawn Nixon to nickel. In a perfect world. So those are things we need to work out over this downtime, and as we get into fall camp, get ready to roll.
Entering your third season coming up, how comfortable are you with now your upperclassmen knowing the nuances of what you want, knowing the nuances of the system defensively, offensively, that they can impart their knowledge to the younger guys just coming in?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any question that sometimes your best coaches and teachers on the field are your older players. To be able to put it in a frame to where a young man understands it, and our guys do an outstanding job of that. That's something I'm excited about moving forward, especially when we have our player run practices in the summer. Because when you pull a ball out there, a coach can't be out there. So your players have got to take ownership in that. And really, I've seen tremendous progress made during this time because of the leadership you have in your organization. I really like our leadership on both sides of the ball.
Visiting with USC football coach Will Muschamp. All right, so two questions here for you. First of all, going back on the defensive side, so if you want to have Nixon as your nickel, does that mean you're looking at Mukwamu full-time at that corner spot? And what are your thoughts about where you want to have Jemias Williams lining up on defense?
We feel like Jemias can be a safety or nickel for us. He could play either safety position. Steve and Montek's been a guy that can play nickel or safety. Keyshawn gives you a physical presence in there against some of the bubble teams and teams, quite frankly, we've struggled on the perimeter as far as supporting and setting edges of our defense. And you look at some of the big plays we gave up last year. We didn't give up many. We were one of the few teams in the country that gave up a lot of explosive plays, but a lot of them were on the perimeter of not setting the edges of defense and tackling well in space. So that's something we've put an emphasis on. We did last year, and we made a little progress. I don't know that we made much. We've got to continue to do a better job there. But all of that combination of guys, and then we've got some freshmen coming in that we think are talented, and we think can help us. So we need to get those guys on campus and see where it goes.
Many people talked about just the difference in your offense with the tempo. How satisfied are you with the progress that made this spring, and how much of that will be evident when we see your team line up for the first time against Coastal in September? Because I know you showed a little bit of it in the spring game, but I'm sure you probably held a lot back.
Well, I think, we showed a good bit of what we want to do. And, to me, it's all about being aggressive and attacking the defense. And that's what we need to do. That's what the mentality we have on defense. We want to attack the offense. And that's the mentality of our program. And that's what we need to be. And if you can't just talk about it, you got to be about it. And so from that standpoint, I think as much as anything, I do love the tempo. I do think it creates opportunities for you in the run game against people that are hard to block. At the end of the day, let's make them get lined up and get in the right gap and get them bounce out of a gap just because of fatigue or misaligned, and all of a sudden we've got a 5 or 6 yard gain, which sometimes when they get their cleats in the dirt, it's hard to block some of those guys we got to face. So I think you saw that in the bowl game. We were able to create some scenes in the run game against a really good front seven of Michigan. But it's more than anything to me is about dictating the tempo of the game, because when an offense is on the ball as a defensive coordinator, you got to make a call. I've been there. I've done that. You got to make a call, and are they going fast, or are they going at a normal tempo, or are they going to look back? And then all of a sudden you've made a call defensively, and they're not going fast. And you look up and you're thinking it's a 2-by-2 1-back formation. All of a sudden it becomes a 2-back formation, a 2-by-1, or it becomes a 3-by-1 formation and a 1-back, or it becomes empty. And you're thinking, man, I don't really like this call right now. So those are things to me that you're able to dictate the tempo of the game. And that's something that Brian, I think, has done a really nice job of through spring to change tempos of the game. It's not always about going fast. That's a part of it and a huge part of it, but it's more than anything about dictating the tempo of the game.
Are you happy where Jake is coming out of spring?
Absolutely. I think he's continued to progress. A guy that completed over 60% of his balls. We want to complain about his accuracy, and there's a lot of college football quarterbacks who like to complete 60% of their balls. But I do think there's some things he's got to calm down in his motion and in his front leg and his plant leg, and those are things that we're working through. And the great thing about Jake Bentley is nobody working harder. I can assure you of that. It's going to put in the time that he needs, that has the respect of his teammates, again, being only one of three, and all three have been in our area at South Carolina of sophomores that have been voted team captain by their teammates. And that shows you the respect he's got of his teammates.
How is he taking to Dan Werner?
Really well. I think Dan's a guy that's a teacher, is a guy that's really done, obviously the experience and wealth of knowledge speaks for itself with his resume. But they've had a very good working relationship, and meeting with Jake, he's excited about his future.
All right, we got about 45 seconds, so I'll just ask you, how do you feel generally about where your program is as you look ahead to year 3? Got about 45 seconds.
Well, we're much better than we were at this point last spring. No different than I said last spring before the first. We're continuing to make progress. Does that mean we're going to win more games? I don't know that. But at this point in time, and the progress we are right now, we're a better football team than we were at last time at this time of the year. But we've got to continue to make progress. What I do like, and I said this before, I love our leadership of our football team. And you talk on offense and defense, we've got guys that know what it takes to be successful. We got guys that understand the expectation and what we need to do to be successful. And that's what excites me as much as anything about this team. I sleep well at night knowing the leadership of our team.
Hey, we thank you very much for taking time out to join us tonight. I know it's a recruiting time, and you've got your Gamecock Club stops as well going on. So we thank you very much and enjoy recruiting in the spring, and we'll see you here in a few weeks, I'm sure.
Well, Phil, now Steve Fink told me you got a Hall of Fame inductee, so I'm going to congratulate you. That's a heck of a deal for you there.
Well, I'm not actually going into the hall, but they're giving me a little plaque, so I appreciate that.
Well, heck, it all counts, man. It don't matter. The plaque counts for a Hall of Fame, right?
You got that right. Thank you, sir.
Hey, you got to count it, man. Y'all take care.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Once again, thanks to Will Muschamp. He was great.
Yeah.
He gave us some good stuff, and we appreciate Will coming on. Thanks to Steve Fink, the SID over at USC, for arranging that for us. And, yeah, like I said leading into it, man, he gets it. He's got it. The facilities are top notch, are only going to get better. You know, they just got to overcome. You know, they've got to overcome that stigma, the stigma of century-long failure in football at South Carolina for the most part. And I don't know how you get over that by winning at the highest level, but by maintaining as well.
Well, first of all, here's the problem. You're surrounded by Georgia, and of course the winning at Clemson recently. But the key point is South Carolina is in rarefied air compared to a lot of football programs who are under 500 for their entire stint of playing football.
Yeah, but USC just not too long ago climbed over the 500 mark.
I thought it was interesting that when he talked about Jamias Williams playing safety, and already I hear fans talking about his height. But you remember that Will Muschamp did coach in the National Football League, and at the time he coached, I remember one of the all-pro safeties in the NFL was Bob Sanders, all 5'8" of them.
Oh, yeah. Knock your head off, too.
So guys can play safety even if some people think
here's the problem. Clemson casts a very wide shadow when it comes to this state. And so many South Carolina fans try to measure their success against Clemson's. You have to measure your success where it comes in the SEC. And I think if you can measure that success there and set your goals accordingly, then not only will you feel a lot better about your program, but your program will probably progress a lot easier. And then you can maybe think about catching up to where Clemson is.
Well, I mean, I think South Carolina fans have just got to come to this conclusion and know this and listen to me. Clemson is not going away for a long, long time. They have established themselves. They are in a great situation in their league the way it's currently outfitted. They recruit extremely well. They're willing to spend whatever it takes to have the facilities and everything they need to win at the highest level. They have made that commitment, and it took a few years for Dabo Swinney to get it rolling, but he's got it rolling now, and they're not going to back up. Yeah, they're not going to go undefeated every year, but they're going to be no more on any given year than a one-loss, or if they have a bad year, it's going to be a two-loss kind of thing. They're now in the neighborhood with what Notre Dame used to be, but Ohio State and what Florida State used to be, Alabama, those teams that won't go undefeated every year, but won't lose more than one in any given year. And they'll be in position to play in the postseason, and they always recruit at a very high level. So they're not backing up. It's going to be up to South Carolina itself to pull itself up by its bootstraps and cut into that margin as best it can. And, you think about it, in Will Muschamp's 2 years at South Carolina, the only team he has not been able to compete with on the field in terms of the scoreboard has been Clemson. Of course, they won games, and in the games that they've lost outside of Clemson, it's all been by 10 points or less. Clemson is the only team that has beaten South Carolina in his 2 years that has won by a big margin. So it's just going to take continuous hard work in recruiting and you got to have some breaks, and you just have to have some guys all come together at the same time playing at a high level.
And
now,
come to the realization that upward mobility in the SEC, especially when you play those teams out west, is very difficult.
But you look at this year's schedule for South Carolina.
Lines up very favorably.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got 4 games on there you should easily put in the win column, here mentally. And then you think about going on the road. You get Vanderbilt and Kentucky on the road. Now, I know Kentucky's been beating South Carolina here of late.
You got to change that.
Yeah, but you also think if you're South Carolina, you can beat Kentucky on the road. You can beat Vanderbilt on the road. You have to go to Florida, and you have to go to who's the other road game?
Mississippi.
Ole Miss, yeah.
Yes.
So, you go 2-2 on the road at worst, and then you go maybe 4-0 at home in the league, no worse than 3-1. You've got yourself a good league record, and maybe if you beat the right people, say you beat Georgia in that second game to open SEC play, you got a chance to win the division.
I think also it's mentally, because I will tell you that when South Carolina played Clemson and beat them 5 in a row, I thought 4 of those years Clemson had a better team talent-wise. And it was something in Clemson's head they couldn't get over. Spurrier, for whatever reason, they couldn't. But then they got over it, and then, of course, now they've had successful teams. But a lot of what South Carolina is doing with Clemson right now is not only talent, but it's psychological.
No question about that. That's good stuff from Will Muschamp. We'll hear from Dabo Swinney. In fact, let's see, do we have time to get to Dabo? No, we don't have time. We'll get to that in the next hour. And if you guys will chat it up for a moment, I'll get the rest of my recruiting together, and we'll do that before the top of the hour.
The thing about Clemson, again, like I said, you can't be so consumed with what they're doing. And I know that you play them head-to-head, so it's hard not to do that. But South Carolina plays in a tougher league. Let's just put it that way. They play in a tougher league, and you could gain a lot by doing less, if that makes any sense, than what Clemson's doing. Clemson's playing teams that, honestly, they could beat with any one of their 4 quarterbacks right now. What South Carolina is being tasked to do is a tougher assignment than what Clemson is tasked to do.
Well, that's what I was talking about. Where Clemson's in a good place in the
that's
league.
What I'm saying. I'm building off of that.
Yeah, they could. I mean, look at the Atlantic Division of the ACC on paper right now.
Terrible, awful.
Wake Forest might be Clemson's biggest competition, unless Florida State rises up.
Florida State is probably the one you're most scared of because you play them on the road.
Right. But they have a new coach. You don't know how everybody's going to react to that. So there's some questions there. But yeah, I mean, Clemson can pretty much, if based on what we see on paper, pretty much sail through its ACC schedule unscathed.
And I think fans have to be realistic. What Muschamp did in his first year to win 6 games, with what he had and the lack of depth, shouldn't have happened. With the injuries he had last year, with Debo going down, half the offensive line going down for a period, and you win 9 games, I mean, relatively speaking, he trotted out some mirrors the first couple of years. If he gets health and that offense takes off, you got to feel that, hey, the sky's the limit.
And the other thing, too, and this is kind of a credit thing and a kudos to Will in this, the fact that they moved the spring practices up so much, and we always were wondering, why in the world do you do that? Think about what he said about how everybody's going to be back with the exception of one player, Chad Terrell.
Yeah.
Everybody. And that's Rico Dowdle. That's Deebo Samuel. That's the guys on defense who didn't play in the spring game. They are going to be as fully stocked as they've been under Will Muschamp when they take the field on August 1st. And assuming that they can get through the fall unscathed, they will field a very competitive team week 2 when they have the defending national runners-up coming to town with the Bulldogs.
All right. Well, we appreciate Muschamp being with us. We'll hear from Dabo Swinney coming up. Also, Brad Brownell, Frank Martin, Kerry Tharp. My goodness, what a crowd we have coming up in hour number 2.
This is probably the best Tuesday post-spring April show that we'll ever do
in the history of mankind. And, of course, recruiting. The icing on the cake coming up in the second hour. And I have got some recruiting news that will just make your head spin.
Don't forget recruiting, too.
Also. Did I mention that the Celtics are playing tonight?
You didn't mention that.
It's game 2 of our series with the Bucks. And we See, I can say that with the Celtics.
You really can't.
And we want to win tonight.
Is that
we want a victory.
Yeah,
Greek freak.
You don't want
Greek freak scares me.
You don't go to Milwaukee and
expect the route.
The one that scares me if I'm the Celtics is they're so steady, and that's Chris Middleton and Malcolm Brogdon. Those two.
There's a reason you
they're
can't.
dangerous.
There's a reason you can't say we when you refer to the Celtics, because nobody wants to see your bare sleeves. No one, not even your wife, wants to see your bare sleeves in a Celtic jersey.
Oh, is that right? I'm going to come in with my number 33. Once we win the championship, and I raise another.